Hello, everyone. My name is Dmitry Lipkin, Vice President of Corporate Communications at Aviatrix, and thank you for joining episode 5 of Customer Flight Plans, The Journey to MultiCloud, with our host and CEO of Aviatrix, Steve Mullaney. We'd like to welcome our special guest today, David Van Dam, Director of DevOps and Infrastructure at Yara. During the show, the audience will be on mute, so if you have any questions, please type them in the Q&A section, and we'll be happy to respond accordingly. We will also have a couple of survey questions regarding this episode, and we welcome your feedback. Thank you again for joining us. And without further ado, I'd like to hand this over to Steve. Steve, please take it away and enjoy the show, everyone.
Great, thanks, Dimitri. Welcome, David. How are you?
Hey, Steve. I'm pretty good.
This was great because David and I talked. We talked in July of last year, and I'll let you talk about. We'll go through kind of who Yara is in your role, David, and your kind of the journey to the cloud and kind of what's next for you guys in the cloud. But, from my perspective, when we talked, anyone who has a mission, as Yara does, to feed the world and protect the planet, that's pretty cool. So anyway, great to have you on the webcast, the Customer Flight Plan. Tell us a little bit about Yara and how you're going to feed the world and protect the planet, and what's your role at Yara, David?
So start a bit about Yara. Yara is a Norwegian company, always been very innovative. So started by basically inventing a process to create fertilizer in a high productive environment, which according to some is probably the invention that saved most human lives ever. If you look at what we did for food production, or what fertilizer did for food production. Since then, Yara is now slightly over 115 years old, if I'm correct. Always been heavily investing in R&D and grew into lots of different businesses, but now focusing back on agriculture, and the rest of the business has been spun off into separate entities. If you look at that history of Yara being in what we call crop nutrition and irrigation, or I think about 5-6 years ago, there was a strategic exercise at Yara of how do we position ourselves, how do we see ourselves, which came up with a new mission and vision for Yara, which is to protect the planet, to responsibly feed the world and protect the planet. The thinking behind it is that we saw a change coming up. One is you see that whatever happens in creating a sustainable future, agriculture is part of that answer, both in the amount of, if you look at the amount of greenhouse gases produced by agriculture, food and land use, food production, agriculture and land use, they're about 20% of global greenhouse gas productions. So that's something you need to do. And also to if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, they're engaging with smallholder farmers and finding a way to make that a more sustainable way of creating food and making a living, that is vital there as well. So agriculture is really in that center of creating a better future. Yara is placed quite well in a global position to interact with farmers around the world. We are selling to 160 countries, so we do have that local farmer interaction in more or less the entire world. So that's that one shift you see happening. And being, I guess, the biggest ammonia producer in the world, if we can shift to green ammonia production, then that would be a tremendous change, both for reducing or creating a carbon-free food production. And green ammonia probably can also play a part in transport, where hydrogen is quite, where it's not very energy dense. We think for shipping and so on, ammonia might be a better fuel because it's more energy dense, so it's easier to stock in bulk on a big cargo ship. So that's a bit Yara's positioning. And then the other side of this, the shift that we saw is this entire digital revolution is also, of course, hitting agriculture. You see more and more that modern tractors, they have an incredible amount of sensors, they collect a huge amount of data. Satellite imagery allows you to really follow up what happens on a field. There's drones, there's basically an incredible amount of data being generated around food production, around agriculture. And also farmers are more and more open to using and using that data. Consumers are more and more interested in that data. So more and more the advanced consumers are interested in what's on my fork. Where does this piece of steak or where does this apple come from, and what's happened to it?
Right.
So that whole drive really pushes us to do something and to put us there. And then our CEO has been quite visionary in putting us at the forefront and excuse the pun, but betting the farm on this new future.
So when did your cloud journey start? Oh, and by the way, what's your role before we get into the cloud journey?
So I'm basically within our digital branch. I would run all what I call core foundational technology or platforms. So it's the core data platforms, data ops, the DevOps, so the developer enablement, and the cloud native development environments. The architecture around our digital side, and very closely with our corporate CISO, how do we implement our security and governance rules into our digital side. So at Yara, digital and IT are not the same unit.
Okay, and you're in the digital.
I'm in the digital side, yeah.
Okay. When did you join Yara?
I joined Yara about now 12 years ago in corporate IT.
Okay.
Did a lot of enterprise architecture, infrastructure architecture.
Okay. And I think you had said that you guys started kind of your cloud journey maybe three or 4 years ago. Maybe talk about that. How did it start? So you were on the traditional IT side, and now you're in the digital side. Did that happen? When you were starting to move into cloud as a company?
So both overlapped a bit. So we saw traditional IT when I was still there. I think that's 5-6 years ago. We started with our first moves to cloud, more lift and shift of traditional workloads and seeing how that behaved, mostly in Azure. Then because that's where your typical on-prem Active Directory environments extend easily into. Then I think 4.5 years ago, I was one of the first to join this new digital side, and there we quickly chose that we are going to start from scratch and not integrate too deeply into legacy, because we didn't see a need to deeply integrate other than API integration and getting data exchange. Mm-hmm. So that allowed us to start from scratch and really aggressively go for a cloud native architecture to immediately push containerization, infrastructure as code, and move from there, and move quite a bit faster than having to figure out how do I integrate securely and follow all processes and rules, and how do I get a CI/CD stack to follow an ITIL process.
So where are you guys now you say in your journey to cloud? So you started a few years ago. Are you mostly AWS? Is that where you are today, or have you started leveraging other clouds, and where
we are? So we're multi-cloud, to be very fair. So if I look at corporate IT, they're heavily Azure based, but we do have what I'd call traditional workloads in AWS as well.
Yep.
Digital is largely AWS based. That's a bit because of some acquisitions, and a bit because the people we are hiring have a much higher knowledge, or they're much more familiar with AWS back then. If you really go to these traditional digital hiring, you find a lot of people coming from that AWS world.
Right.
Still looked a bit funny at Microsoft. That's actually changed in the last 5 years incredibly. So Microsoft's become a really hip vendor.
Yeah. Any movement towards anybody looking at AI applications on GCP? Is that something that you guys are looking into?
GCP is not on our roadmap. We've looked at it, but we're kind of happy with Azure AWS and that complexity. We are looking at some regional vendors. Like if we really would expand heavily in the Chinese market, then obviously an AliCloud becomes more important.
Yeah.
And then I think our next investigation, where we're looking at now, is more at the edge of what do we do with edge, and probably pick a vendor there and see how we integrate everything again.
Do you connect? So are the tractors connected? I mean, do you go all the way out to effectively industrial IoT all the way out to the tractors?
We have 1 or 2 sensors, so we try to not get too deeply into the hardware business, because that comes with a very specific problems of your own. So we have something called the end sensor, which is basically a nitrogen sensor on top of a tractor. but that is not extremely, that's not very widespread. So we try to partner there. I think there's no use in trying to get your own sensors on if you can get John Deere or Case to get you access to their cloud and their data. That's a much more interesting approach than.
Yeah, I would imagine over time those tractors become, micro data centers with running compute and storage and networking, and there's probably a lot that it wants to compute out there before sending it all the way back into the main cloud, right?
Yeah, so there is already a large part of that, I think. We now input, so one of our apps is variable rates fertilizer application. So we're based on our algorithms and either drone or satellite images. We know how grain is growing across a field. And rather than having advice that says spread 60 kilograms per hectare, you can tailor to where your grain is growing less to have a bit more fertilizer, and where it's growing well to have a bit less fertilizer, so that you get a more even harvest. And so we can generate then these spreader maps that we can automatically download to a tractor. And then when the tractor either drives itself or the farmer drives the tractor over the field, it'll automatically adjust to where it has to spread without any manual interaction.
Yeah.
So to that degree, we have that integration.
Yeah. No, it's I just find that super, super fascinating. I mean, just autonomous farming and efficiency and optimization and software and cloud, and applying all these digital, the digital enterprise concepts to something that, most people think of as just very manual, like farming, is super, super fascinating. So how did you come across Aviatrix?
We were working with a partner who built our core first iteration of our data platform, which is IBM, to mention them. And so we'd already been struggling with what do we do with our cloud networking, because one of our core paradigms is we try to avoid getting too locked into one of the hyperscalers. We want to have a lot of our core infrastructure, or the way we build applications is cloud agnostic. You can't really do your infrastructure cloud agnostic, but we try to create an abstraction layer so that the developers, or we can move the applications around as we see fit.
Okay.
And so we looked at something that can interconnect everything, and then IBM had already picked a solution for them, and we looked at it, which was Aviatrix. So we looked at it and we liked it a lot. So.
And when was this? A couple of years ago?
This is about 2 years ago, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Did you look at doing it yourself? I mean, I know a lot of times our competition, people always ask me, who are your competition? And I always have a bad answer. I was telling everybody it's a bad answer. We don't have any competition. As a vendor, our competition is DevOps people like yourself that just say, I'm going to go program the native constructs. I'll leverage the native constructs of AWS or the clouds, and I'll script some things and I'll terraform it. I'll just do it myself. Did you look at that?
We looked at that and we found it a bit scary, to be honest. I think, to be honest, we haven't really followed up. The bit I read is that yes, the native transit gateways and so on in Amazon have improved a lot. Yeah. But when we looked at it, it was causing us a bit of nightmare of how do we connect everything. Once you have this mesh of I don't know, 10 data centers around the world, and you want everything to talk to everything, to keep that managed in a traditional in-house controlled setting, that's a lot of Terraform code to figure it out. And
and we've seen that. I'm glad you said that. It's just that it always sounds good, and then you really get into it. It's interesting, the cloud providers will tend to tell people, hey, we do everything and anything you'll ever need in networking and network security. And you don't need to go to anybody else, and our services are what you need. And what you find is they're very basic services, and they're very manual, and they're complex. And yes, you could probably throw bodies at it, but it's going to be very complex. It's going to be difficult operationally, and then you have to operationalize it going forward. And that's, I think, the thing that so it's good that you saw that first and didn't go into it. A lot of our customers sometimes will actually try it first, and then they realize only after trying it, okay, this is not as easy as it seems. The brochure of how this is going to look is a lot better than reality.
Yeah, you hit it there. It scared us a bit. When we started really investigating, it scared us a bit. And then definitely the thought of going multi-cloud got us a bit headachy of.
Yeah.
We probably figure it out just within AWS, but then connecting Azure up to it, and how do you interact with it, connecting a corporate WAN to it, and getting at least some picture centrally of what's happening, how is it flowing, what is my latency between my data centers. That was, it's not impossible, but like you said, it would have cost us quite a few bodies to figure it out, and probably some extra investment in monitoring suites, and I don't know what else.
No, in the last, I think it was maybe about a year and a half ago, we introduced a visibility tool called Copilot. Are you using Copilot now?
Yeah, we're using Copilot. We got it working a month or two ago, I think. So it took us a while. I didn't fully prioritize this, but now it's there. That's really helping us to understand how our flows are.
Yep.
As we see these transatlantic flows increasing between our solutions, between the way our applications work, it's really good to have that and to understand a bit what are our traffic patterns.
Yeah.
And what I also liked is we grew a bit organically. So people just started building things, and then we got them under the central DevOps department, started figuring out what they did. But then the ability to sort of slowly take control of the VPC, start monitoring their ingress, egress, and then slowly lock that down and understand how the flows is, and slowly integrate it into the network. That was also a very handy feature. You didn't have to really redo everything. You can just take quite a bit into management without really breaking a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So in terms of, as that kind of that DevOps mentality, that digital, I don't want to do it you purposely broke away from corporate IT because you didn't want to do it the old way and the way that we've done it in 1994 with kind of that Cisco data center. I want to do it the new way. I want to do it the cloud way. I want to automate. How has that been with Aviatrix? I mean, does that fit into that kind of agile, Terraform, DevOps mentality? Yeah,
so we've learned two things. One is that, I'll step away from Aviatrix for a second. One is that we thought, like, if we integrate Terraform with Git and we allow developers to write their own YAML, they'll be happy, and I need a small central team. What we've learned is that developers hate writing Terraform code and YAML code. So it's moved back to, you have a central infrastructure team that sits in.
You know what it is, David, is if you're not giving people what they want, they have to improvise, they have to do stuff. But if you give it to them in a way that they can handle it and simple, they're going to leverage it.
Yeah. So that's now our next step is indeed to create an abstraction between Terraform and our developers, so that they have a much easier way to describe the infrastructure they need, which is where I think it's Backblaze, or I have a mind blank now. I think Backblaze is one of these solutions, or just creating your custom Kubernetes operators that you can then.
I mean, the bottom line is no one wants to know anything about the infrastructure, right? If you are an application developer, do you want to know anything about the infrastructure? No.
Well, it depends. Sometimes they want, because developers tend to be highly opinionated, but then
but they know what they want, right? Here are my requirements. I need this.
Exactly.
Declare what I need as a service, and then you just figure out how to go and do it. And I really don't want to have anything to do with it.
That is correct. And what we've learned is we're going to be able to shift. We have development teams who feel comfortable controlling everything. As soon as they have to collaborate with an outside team, they feel like that is not the way we want to operate, because we like having control that gets to set our pace. So our model allows us to sort of shift how much self-service we offer. And Aviatrix fits that quite well, because it fits our infrastructure as code model, where we can play around with how much access we give to those infrastructure repositories.
How big is the digital infrastructure team?
So we are about 20 now working on digital infrastructure for, I'd say, 300 to 400 engineers. So it's a fairly skeleton team.
Okay. Have you? What about training? Do you have people that are ACE trained? Aviatrix certified engineer training?
I think 8 to 10 of our engineers are now ACE trained.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, but I know that we offered all of them to take it, and quite a few took the training and got certified, so that helps.
Okay.
And then we have a sort of center of knowledge center of a few that band together and work.
Yeah.
And now we're reaching out to corporate IT because I think networking to me is one of the surfaces that I first want to move to back to corporate IT, who's really good at running steady state services, at fine tuning them. So this is one of the first where we want to move a service that we've sort of experimented with and think we're happy back to IT and say, now you can run and optimize this.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah, I mean, one of the things I've seen in a lot of our enterprise customers is they're actually using the ACE training, and they're going out and they're offering that out to all of their infrastructure people, right? As a way to just do a career advancement. This is the way of the world, that it's the center of gravity is no longer on-prem, it's in the cloud. This is what's happening. And you can't leave those people behind. You have to bring them along. You have to give them the training, the certification, and so forth. And we're seeing a lot of our enterprises now actually not mandate, but really almost mandate, you're going to go through some level of multi-cloud networking training. And that's a good thing. And it allows them to have career advancement within the company, and also recruit more people and make it an exciting place to work, because they see that they're going to be learning new cloud things and not old on-prem infrastructure.
Yeah, that is definitely so. Both, you need a very different type of person. So on hiring, my approach has always been to try and find developers and train them in infrastructure, rather than to try and teach a old school infrastructure person to learn how to code. And so in that sense, also being able to send a software engineer on a network course that gets in the basics is really a good thing to advance that quickly.
Right.
But that's really where we focus now, is getting software engineers to run our infrastructure.
Yeah. Do you see on the digital side of things that you have a more closer, a closer relationship to the, I would say, to the business of Yara? I mean, do you see that connection? And what are the business benefits that you've gained from Aviatrix and just this digital infrastructure?
I think it's fairly similar in the sense that an infrastructure team always, our customer is are the solution teams, are the application teams. So our VP of marketing isn't really interested in how we do networking. But again, the ability to move very, very fast in the cloud has allowed our application teams to get very fast to the business. So the ability to spin up a cloud environment very fast in a certain region, get some sort of secure connectivity to it, and deploy a proof of concept there with a relatively good amount of security behind it. That's been really interesting. If we want to do something for rice farmers in India now, it is much easier to pick up some code, deploy it, and figure it out. While before, that would have been much more difficult.
Right.
And so also by embedding our infrastructure engineers in the actual application teams, we do get much closer to where the action is. We see what's coming, and we see where the application teams are. Our engineers are part of the agile sprint planning, so they know when the product owners, when the business side is in those meetings, they know what's coming and they know how we have to adapt to that.
Right.
So yeah, it's not you don't typically bring infrastructure to very close to your business, but it needs to follow, and it needs to be very rapid, and it needs to sort of know what's coming before it's being asked.
Yep. So somebody just asked, I'll just ask you this question. Somebody said, there was a question, David said, why do you think it is wise to train developer and infrastructure, and you do not think the other way around so feasible? In my view, today is time when every infrastructure person is also trying to learn some form of scripting, as the world is driving towards automation and orchestration. So
Okay.
does it go the other way?
Yeah. So maybe I should qualify that a bit more, but I have a team that is, we started with a team that was heavily traditional infrastructure. So we taught all of them, or they all could write software. So we have a very strong knowledge base from there, who are traditionally infrastructure schooled people. They are sysadmins by trade. They've done the ITIL trainings, all the old service management trainings. we just find now that adding software engineers to that mix changes the way they think. And so that is, I think you need a healthy mix.
Okay. Yeah. No, I agree. So
It is faster though to teach a developer the basics of infrastructure than to someone who has never written software, to get them to a reasonable level of automation and writing software.
well, especially when you're using Aviatrix too, because we hide a lot of that complexity. I mean, that's what we do, right? We sit atop. We program a lot of the native services in the particular clouds, and with Aviatrix, you don't need to know a lot of those things. You kind of just need to know Aviatrix, and it's consistent across all the different clouds. So,
Yes.
yeah. So where are things going for Yara and from the digital infrastructure team? What does it look like the next couple of years?
So for Yara and whole, I would say our entire IT landscape will slowly change. That's more a philosophical vision of, but I see that companies become more and more ecosystem companies. Yara itself is positioning itself as part of the food chain ecosystem. But also, if you look at green ammonia and other trends, you see less and less that we're a vertically integrated company. And so more and more of our integration is going to happen on data layers, on output of processes, rather than having unified managed processes around the world. So that has an incredible effect on how you run your corporate IT, how you run your entire IT landscape. You'll probably see some more disbursement of your ERP, or probably not one global ERP, but local ERPs that then might be the same platform. That's up to a choice. So I see a much more distributed IT landscape.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. So in the past, you had your data center, and you tended to be very vertical. You did everything inside your data center, and it was walled off, and you controlled it, and there was no outside influences at all. And I think when you go to cloud, I think you're right. I think it gets into this hyper distributed mode, and you have security concerns, you have agility, you have it puts an incredible amount of demands, I would say, on the infrastructure to be able to support that model. And I think the thing that I've been in IT for 35 years, and what I realize is when the application rocks, the infrastructure needs to roll. Like, it is there to support the application, and when that starts going distributed, and it's what does Yara care about? Your apps and your data.
Mm-hmm.
Infrastructure is there to support that.
Fully with you. So I think to some degree, how much cloud has changed the business case of infrastructure is hard to define, because every old paradigm of you centralize, you optimize, all that's kind of gone. There's not too much incentive anymore to centralize, because you don't have to build a brick and mortar data center.
Right.
Also, you don't really have to build these major servers. More and more of your business platforms are PaaS and SaaS. So this need to run these gigantic old school mainframes or Unix servers running your SAP and your Oracle databases somewhere centrally, that's all disappearing, and you get to a very different landscape. And that has,
well,
your entire IT becomes more what I call composable. You get components and APIs everywhere that you connect together and secure and build a front end layer that consists out of lots of different Lego blocks.
That's right, and it's real time. It's very on demand, and you go from this model. And we've talked about it in this past. It's not a data center. It's now more centers of data, and those centers of data may be all over the place. They may be data sovereignty and GDPR issues. You may have data that resides on a tractor. I mean, it's just decomposed, as you said, into multiple different pluggable pieces.
That's what, and what I'm still somewhat struggling with to guide the vision is how much is the other side of the story going to format this, because next to that spread of data, you also got this concept of data gravity, where if you really want to create insight over your data, it's handy to have it all in the same place, because running a distributed algorithm over your data is getting quite complex. And so how does that need for having more centralized data for your data science, for your AI, for your ML, match with a very distributed data, and with all the data privacy, data sovereignty laws that are coming? Can I move my data out of India into an American data center to run algorithms on top of it, or do I have to? That is a
I mean, it's the classic computer science thing where it logically needs to look centralized, but physically needs to be distributed.
and
That's for sure. You're going to have things physically, and you don't want to have to move them around. And the last thing you want to do is have all your data in one location. Like the cost it has gravity to move it all around. So, but logically, you want it to look like that. And then I think what ends up that forces is the infrastructure, the networking, the security, all the things around that has to be, encryption matters, high performance matters, latency matters. Simplicity, all the things that Aviatrix does, and this is going to explode. I mean, and you people look at edge, look at the edge computing. I mean, that's just starting. And somebody asked a question, do we have any plans for micro gateways that can be run anywhere? Absolutely, we've got plans to go. I call it deeper, wider, higher. But part of the wider is we're going to go to the edge. Why? Because the apps and the data are forcing it. And we're the network platform, the networking and security platform. And they want us to have that visibility and control, not just inside the VPCs and the VNets, in the cloud, but as the cloud extends out to the edge. And let's face it, data centers and edges and tractors are going to look like spoke VPCs. They're going to look like cloud. You're not going to have a different architecture. When the architecture is cloud, you're going to push that everywhere. And I want all of my tools and all of my networking to work out at that tractor. And guess what? It's all going to be software. And then we are going to have these little micro gateways that are going to run as part of the IoT, kind of that industrial edge or just the edge computing. It has to. And it's going to look like a VPC, like a spoke VPC. Mm-hmm. Whether it's in US East 1 or some region of AWS or in a tractor in the middle of Iowa, I want it to look the same. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I'm trying to grasp it. I think largely maybe VPC is taking it too far, but then I need to think a bit more about it. But it is you get this mix of concepts of you move to this zero trust model where you get access and you build up on your network whatever you need. So yeah, I can see this. The micro gateways both on developer and end user workstations, sort of traditionally replacing that traditionally remote access VPN type stuff. Sensors. You do need a holistic view on how everything is going to communicate.
I mean, and whether it's a VPC or it's an access, when you think about it, and COVID has just exploded this. It's absolutely accelerated the move towards digitization in cloud. I mean, you guys were far ahead of this. Every other enterprise has realized they need to go and do this. And now where's access into your cloud from? Everywhere. Yeah, it's not necessarily just in the building that you used to have anymore. Your workers are everywhere. Your partners are everywhere. It's going to move out to the edge. I mean, you need that secure access from anywhere you are.
Yeah, I'm fully with you. So there's not really a question, so I don't really know how to react to that. But
so what else? Anything else? Any parting comments in terms of even just just Aviatrix, your experience? Any recommendations to anyone listening that are evaluating Aviatrix? What is your lessons learned?
So one thing that we learned is we did have to restart a bit. We started on our own. So basically we got the metered version and we started playing around with it because we liked it. Then sent some people to ACE training, then got in touch with you, got a full-blown support model and figured out that we didn't really fully know what we're doing. So if you start from scratch, I would get Aviatrix and I would get some professional services to support me. So that's really helped us to re-architect and get the right way.
Okay.
We didn't exactly go about the right way. So now I think we've cleaned up most of that, which is good, and we're starting to get that visibility.
Great.
So that I would advise is at least get someone who knows what they're doing, and just because it's quite easy to get started, but it's not. You need a bit of help to do it right.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Well, hey, this has been fantastic. I'm super fascinated with Yara and the journey that you guys are on. I'm definitely going to keep in touch to see how that is, and on your fantastic mission. And we're just at Aviatrix just super pleased that we can be a small part in helping you achieve that mission.
It's been tremendous working with you guys. It's been fun, and it's also great to see how you're booming. I saw the latest valuation round, so it's really good to see you guys growing it.
We will be here for 40 years.
Well,
and hopefully Yara, that's our goal. We have this mentality of customer for life. So you guys are, I don't know, what did you say? How old? 100-year-old?
1904. So
1904. Good Lord. Okay. Yeah. Well, hopefully we're a customer for at least another 40 or 50 years for you guys.
So.
Okay. Great.
Thanks. It's been great, Steve.
Great. Dimitri, did you have any closing?
Yeah, just wanted to say thanks to everyone for joining. There's questions that should pop up on your screen. Please take a few minutes to respond. We appreciate your feedback. And I wanted to thank a special thank you to David for being our guest. And stay tuned for episode number 6. Have a great week, rest of your week, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see you, David.